Before we begin this journey of survival and redemption, please take a brief second to subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring more meaningful stories like this to life. Thank you. The desert does not scream, it whispers. It is a slow, methodical erasure of the self. Ryan Cole knew the science of it. He knew that the human body consists roughly of 60% water. He knew that in an arid environment with ambient temperatures exceeding 110 degrees Fahrenheit, the body loses between 1 to 2 liters of fluid per hour through perspiration and respiration. He knew the stages: thirst, lethargy, confusion, and finally, the shutdown. Ryan was a former Navy SEAL. He had been trained to endure the unendurable. He had been submerged in freezing surf, marched through humid jungles until his boots rotted, and kept awake for days under psychological duress. But training is a simulation of reality. The Mojave Desert was reality itself. His vehicle, a rugged off-road utility truck, was a smoking ruin 20 miles back, the victim of a catastrophic axle failure and a subsequent roll down a jagged ravine. He had survived the crash with bruised ribs and a laceration on his forehead that had long since caked with dried blood and dust. He had salvaged a single canteen, his tactical knife, and a long-range radio that had been smashed in the impact. Now, on the third day of walking, the canteen was a hollow aluminum shell hitting his hip bone. Ryan stumbled. The horizon was vibrating, a heat haze that turned the distant mountains into liquid mercury. His boots, heavy tactical grade leather, felt like lead weights. Every step was a negotiation with gravity. His tongue was swollen, a dry sponge filling his mouth, making swallowing impossible. "Keep moving," his internal monologue commanded, though the voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Find shade, find elevation, find water. But there was no shade. The scrub brush was low and sparse, offering no respite from the white sun that hammered down like a physical weight. Ryan checked his wrist, but he had lost his watch in the crash. Time had ceased to be measured in hours and minutes. It was now measured in heartbeats and footsteps. He fell. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. His knees simply unlocked. The ground rushed up to meet him, hard and hot. The grit of the sand pressed against his cheek. He lay there, staring horizontally across the desert floor. A beetle crawled past his nose, black and armored, perfectly adapted to this hellscape. Ryan envied the insect. This is it, he thought. The panic he expected didn't come. Instead, there was a strange, narcotic calm. This was hypoxia and severe dehydration taking hold. The brain, starving for oxygen and fluid, was beginning to release endorphins to ease the transition into death. He closed his eyes. The darkness behind his lids was red and pulsing. Then, a sound. It was not the wind. It was not the blood rushing in his ears. It was the crunch of gravel. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Ryan forced one eye open. The glare was blinding, but a silhouette stood over him. It was small. The edges of the figure were blurred by the sun, creating a halo effect. Was he hallucinating? It was common in the final stages. The mind conjured angels or demons to accompany the soul out of the body. "You look broken," the voice said. It was high-pitched, curious, and utterly devoid of fear. Ryan tried to speak, but only a dry rasp emerged. He coughed, the movement sending spikes of pain through his bruised ribs. He squinted. The silhouette resolved into a boy. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old. He wore oversized cargo shorts, a faded t-shirt with a rocket ship on it, and heavy boots that looked too big for his feet. He was holding a lizard in one hand, gently, by the midsection. The boy tilted his head. He didn't look at Ryan like a dying man. He looked at him like a bicycle with a flat tire. "Water!" Ryan croaked, the word tearing at his throat. The boy reached into a small canvas satchel slung across his shoulder and pulled out a plastic bottle. He didn't hand it over immediately. He unscrewed the cap and knelt. "Slow," the boy commanded. "Mom says if you drink too fast when you're dry, you'll throw it up." Ryan accepted the bottle with trembling hands. It was warm, but it tasted like the sweetest nectar on earth. He took a small sip, forcing himself to obey the child. The liquid hit his stomach and cramped it instantly, but he held it down. "Who are you?" Ryan whispered. "Noah." the boy said. He released the lizard, which skittered away under a rock. You're heavy. I can't carry you. I don't expect you to. Ryan tried to push himself up. His arms shook violently. He managed to get to his knees, swaying like a drunkard. Noah watched him with critical eyes. You have a radio. He pointed to the broken device clipped to Ryan's belt. It's broken, Ryan said, his voice gaining a fraction of strength. Everything is broken. Noah shook his head. He looked at the radio, then at Ryan's bleeding forehead, then at the vast emptiness of the desert around them. He didn't see tragedy. He saw a project. My mom can fix it, Noah said. Fix what? Everything, the boy replied simply. Come on. Ryan didn't know why he followed. Logic dictated he should stay put and wait for a search party that might never come. But the certainty in the boy's voice was a tether to reality. Ryan Cole, a man who had been trained to lead, to command, and to conquer, surrendered his will to a child in oversized boots. He stood up and step by agonizing step followed Noah into the shimmering heat. The trek was a blur of pain and disorientation. Ryan focused entirely on the back of Noah's head. The boy moved through the desert not as an intruder, but as a part of the ecosystem. He stepped on stable rocks, avoided loose sand drifts, and navigated around patches of jumping chala cactus with an innate spatial awareness. Ryan's military mind, though foggy, began to catalog the environment. They were moving slightly uphill, towards a cluster of rock formations that offered natural windbreaks. After what felt like an hour, they crested a ridge. Ryan expected a tent, a trailer, perhaps a broken-down RV. What he saw made him stop in his tracks, swaying dangerously. Nestled in the shadow of a massive limestone overhang was a structure that defied easy classification. It wasn't just a house, it was a compound of survival engineering. The main structure appeared to be built from repurposed shipping containers, welded together and partially buried in the hillside to utilize the Earth's thermal mass, a technique Ryan recognized as passive cooling. The roof was a mosaic of photovoltaic solar panels, angled perfectly to catch the southern exposure, but it was the details that caught his eye. A tall vertical shaft rose from the center of the roof, a wind catcher, an ancient Persian architectural design used to funnel cool air down into the living space while venting hot air out. Beside the house, a large parabolic trough made of polished metal sheets was focused on a central pipe, a solar water heater. Home, Noah announced. They descended the ridge. As they approached, Ryan saw the perimeter was marked not by fences, but by careful landscaping, swales and berms designed to capture flash floodwater and direct it toward a garden that was flourishing with hardy, drought-resistant vegetables. This wasn't a desperate squat in the wasteland, it was a high-functioning off-grid biosphere. A woman emerged from beneath the hood of a massive rusted diesel generator sitting on a concrete pad. She wiped grease from her hands onto a rag tucked into her belt. She wore heavy work pants, a tank top stained with oil, and welding goggles pushed up into her messy dark hair. She didn't scream when she saw Ryan. She didn't gasp. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned him instantly. She wasn't looking at a person, she was performing a triage assessment. Posture, failing. Skin turgor, poor. Consciousness, drifting. Noah, she said, her voice calm but authoritative. Protocol. He's dehydrated, Mom. Found him near the dry wash. He has a broken radio, Noah reported, sounding like a junior field medic. Lena Morales dropped the rag and moved toward Ryan. She didn't offer a hand to shake. She stepped under his arm, taking his weight across her shoulders with surprising strength. She smelled of diesel fuel, sage, and ozone. Easy, she said. Her voice was lower than he expected, grounded. Don't try to help. Just let your legs move. I can walk, Ryan lied, his pride flaring up even as his vision tunneled. Sure you can, Ranger Rick. That's why you're gray, she retorted, hauling him toward the entrance. They passed through a heavy steel door. The transition was shocking. Inside, the air was cool, at least 20 degrees cooler than the outside. The walls were lined with insulation made from what looked like recycled denim and foam. It was quiet, a hushed sanctuary against the screaming sun. She guided him to a low cot in the corner of the main living area. The room was a workshop disguised as a home. Shelves were stacked with organized jars of screws, bolts, and capacitors. A wall was covered in schematics drawn on whiteboard paint. There were oscilloscopes, soldering irons, and multimeters sitting next to a stack of children's books. Lena lowered him onto the cot. Ryan's head hit the pillow, and the ceiling began to spin. Noah, grab the IV kit from the sterile cabinet. Saline, 18-gauge needle, she ordered. On it, the boy replied, vanishing into another room. Ryan tried to focus on her face. She had a scar running through her left eyebrow, interrupting the arch. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and completely devoid of pity. I don't need an IV, Ryan mumbled. Just water. Your gastric emptying rate is compromised, Lena said, rolling up his sleeve. She tied a rubber tourniquet around his bicep with practiced efficiency. You drink enough water to fix this systemic dehydration, and you'll vomit it up before it absorbs. We need to bypass the gut. Vascular access is the only way to rehydrate without shock. Ryan blinked. You're a doctor? She tapped the vein in his forearm, finding it despite his collapsed vascular system. No, I'm an engineer. The body is just a hydraulic system with electrical impulses. Right now, your pressure is low, and your coolant is empty. Noah returned with a sealed bag of saline and a kit. Lena tore the package open with her teeth, prepped the needle, and inserted it into Ryan's vein in one smooth motion. He barely felt the prick. She taped it down and hung the bag on a hook above the cot. Rest, she commanded. Don't talk! You're losing moisture with every breath. Ryan watched the clear liquid dripping through the chamber. Drip, drip, drip. It was a rhythm, a countdown or a count-up, he wasn't sure. The cool air, the hum of an inverter on the wall, and the steady presence of this woman who spoke of biology like mechanics. It all swirled together. My mom can fix it, Noah whispered from somewhere nearby. Ryan's eyes closed, and for the first time in 3 days, he slept without the fear of never waking up. Waking up was a slow ascent from a deep, dark ocean. Ryan opened his eyes and stared at a ceiling made of corrugated metal, insulated with spray foam. The light in the room was soft. Coming from LED strips powered by the battery bank he could hear humming softly in the corner. He tried to sit up. His head throbbed, but the blinding agony was gone. The nausea had subsided into a dull hunger. He looked at his arm. The IV bag was empty, the line capped off professionally. He swung his legs over the side of the cot. His boots had been removed, placed neatly by the door. His tactical shirt was folded on a chair, washed and drying. He was wearing a loose t-shirt that smelled of lavender detergent. He stood up, testing his balance. Weak, but stable. Ryan walked slowly around the main room. It was a marvel of efficiency. Every object had a purpose. There were no decorations, only tools and resources. A ham radio setup sat on a desk, but the antenna cable was disconnected. Beside it lay his own broken radio, disassembled. The casing was open, the circuit board exposed under a magnifying glass. He heard voices outside and moved toward the door. Opening it, the evening heat hit him, but it was the softer heat of twilight. The sky was a bruising purple and orange. In the yard, Lena and Noah were standing by the wind turbine. The blades were still. The bearing is seized, Lena was saying, pointing to the hub of the turbine. She was holding a large wrench. Sand got into the housing. Friction creates heat. Heat expands the metal. Metal locks up. So we need to grease it? Noah asked. Grease isn't enough. We need to polish the race, remove the pitting, and reseal it. If we just grease it, the grit will turn into a grinding paste and destroy the shaft. Ryan leaned against the doorframe. You're teaching him tribology? Lena turned. She didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed slightly, seeing him standing. I'm teaching him why things fail. If you understand why they break, you don't fear the breaking. She walked over to him, wiping her hands. You're up. That's good. Your urine output? Ryan blinked, caught off guard by the directness. I haven't gone yet. She nodded. Keep drinking. The saline got you out of the danger zone, but you're still in a deficit. There's stew on the stove, lentils and rabbit. High protein, easy to digest. Rabbit. Traps, Noah said proudly. I checked the snare line this morning. Ryan looked at the woman. Thank you. You saved my life. I repaired a system that was crashing. Lena corrected him, though her tone was less harsh than before. You were lucky Noah was on his perimeter walk. We don't get many visitors. Actually, we don't get any. I was part of a convoy, Ryan explained, feeling the need to justify his presence. Training exercise, miles south. My vehicle rolled. Radio smashed. I walked the wrong way. The magnetic declination in this area is tricky if you're using an old compass, Lena said. And the iron deposits in the hills interfere with GPS sometimes. It's a dead zone. That's why I picked it. Picked it? To live, she said. She gestured to the compound. I used to work in aerospace, designing systems for satellites. High stress, high stakes. If a screw was loose, a billion-dollar project burned up in the atmosphere. I spent my life worrying about catastrophic failure. She looked at Noah, who was now climbing the tower of the wind turbine with a safety harness. Then my life actually had a catastrophic failure, she said, her voice tightening. She didn't elaborate. So I came here, where the only things that break are things I can fix with my hands. Ryan looked at his disassembled radio on her workbench inside. You took my radio apart. I was curious, she admitted. Military encryption chip is fried. The antenna coil is snapped. The battery contacts are corroded. Can you fix it? Lena looked him in the eye. It depends. On what? On whether you want to call for a ride out of here immediately, or if you're willing to wait until I have the parts. Ryan looked at the vast, darkening desert. He looked at his trembling hands. He looked at Noah, fearless on the tower, and Lena, standing solid as a rock. He realized he wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. The accident had shaken something deep inside him. His confidence, his identity as a warrior. He felt defective. I'm in no rush, Ryan said quietly. Lena nodded, accepting the answer. Good. Then you can help me with the turbine tomorrow. You look like you know how to lift heavy things. Eat the stew, sleep. We work at dawn. She turned back to her son, shouting instructions on how to secure the harness. Ryan watched them. He realized that this place wasn't just a shelter. It was a rehabilitation center for broken things. And for the first time since the crash, he wondered if he was one of the things on Lena's list to be repaired. The next morning arrived with a silence so profound it felt heavy. Ryan woke before the sun, a habit ingrained by a decade of military service. His body was stiff, a road map of bruises and recovering muscles, but the dizziness was gone. He drank the entire liter of water Lena had left by his bedside, the liquid cool and stabilizing. When he stepped outside, the desert was a palette of cool blues and grays, waiting for the sun to set it on fire. Lena was already at the base of the wind turbine, a mug of coffee steaming on a rock nearby. She was laying out tools on a canvas tarp. Socket wrenches, a bearing puller, a tub of high-temp grease, and a heavy-duty pulley system. You're late, she said without looking up. It was 05:30. I didn't hear a reveille, Ryan replied, rolling his shoulders to loosen the stiffness. The sun is the alarm clock out here, Lena said. Once it hits the ridge, we have about 4 hours of workable temperature before the metal gets too hot to touch without gloves. We need to drop the turbine hub, replace the main bearing, and hoist it back up. Ryan looked up at the tower. It was 40 feet tall, a lattice of steel tubing. That hub weighs at least 200 pounds. 240, Lena corrected, which is why we aren't lifting it. We're using physics. Noah appeared from the greenhouse munching on a raw carrot. He handed Ryan a pair of heavy leather gloves. Mom says you're the counterweight. The counterweight? I don't have a winch truck, Lena explained, pointing to a rope and pulley system rigged to the top of the tower. I have a block and tackle with a 4-to-1 mechanical advantage. That means for every 4 feet of rope you pull, the load moves 1 foot, but it feels 4 times lighter. To lift 240 pounds, we only need to exert 60 pounds of force. But the friction in the old pulleys adds resistance. I need someone on the ground anchor while I guide it down from the top. You're going up there? Ryan asked, eyeing the swaying tower. I know the bolt pattern. You don't, she said, clipping her harness to the safety line. She began to climb, moving with the rhythmic grace of someone who trusted her equipment implicitly. Ryan stood at the base, rope in hand. He watched her ascend. In the teams, trust was currency. You trusted your swim buddy with your oxygen, your life. Here, He was trusting a woman he met yesterday to not drop a quarter-ton of steel on his head, and she was trusting him to hold the line. "Ready!" she shouted from the top, her voice carried away by the morning breeze. "Ready?" Ryan braced himself, wrapping the rope around his waist for extra friction. The descent of the hub was a lesson in tension. Ryan felt the weight bite into his gloves. He had to feed the rope smoothly, too fast, and the momentum would snap the line. Too slow, and Lena would be stuck holding the guideline in a precarious position. "Smooth, Ryan, smooth," Noah coached, standing safely out of the drop zone. "Don't jerk it." They got the hub down. It hit the tire placed on the ground with a dull thud. Lena rappelled down seconds later, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Not bad," she assessed, looking at the coil of rope. "You have good hands. Steady." "I've rappelled out of a few helicopters," Ryan said, kneeling to inspect the turbine hub. "Helicopters have engines," Lena muttered, grabbing a wrench. "Here, we only have leverage." For the next 3 hours, they worked in a companionable silence. Lena disassembled the casing, revealing the destroyed bearing. It was a mess of metal shavings and dried black grease. "Catastrophic failure due to contamination," Lena diagnosed, holding up the pitted metal ring. "Sand is harder than steel. It gets in, acts like sandpaper, and grinds the surface until the heat welds it together." "How do you prevent it?" Ryan asked, handing her the fresh grease. "You can't prevent it completely," she said, packing the new bearing with a bright red synthetic lubricant. "Entropy is the law of the universe. Everything moves toward disorder. The only thing we can do is maintenance. We clean, we seal, we replace. You don't fix things once and walk away. You commit to them." Ryan paused, holding a bolt. The words struck a chord. He had spent his career breaking things, doors, regimes, enemy networks. He had never really learned the art of maintenance. When he broke, the Navy discharged him. There was no maintenance schedule for a soldier with a fractured spirit. "Is that why you're out here?" Ryan asked quietly. "To maintain this?" Lena stopped. She looked at the horizon, where the heat waves were starting to dance. "I'm out here because the world is too loud. In the city, when something breaks, you throw it away and buy a new one. People, relationships, toasters, it doesn't matter. Here, if this turbine breaks, we lose power. If the water pump fails, we thirst. The consequences are real. It keeps me honest." She slotted the new bearing into place with a satisfying click. "Pass me the torquey wrench," she said, the moment of vulnerability over. "We need to tighten these to 80 foot-pounds. Too loose, it vibrates apart. Too tight, the bolt shears." Ryan watched her set the wrench. She was precise, mathematical, yet there was an art to it. As they hoisted the repaired hub back up the tower, straining against the rope, Ryan felt a burn in his muscles that felt good. It was productive pain. It wasn't the pain of injury. It was the pain of effort. When the turbine finally spun, catching the midday wind with a soft, rhythmic whoosh, 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 Noah cheered. "Power is flowing," the boy shouted, checking a meter on the side of the house. "Batteries are charging." Ryan stood back, wiping grease on his pants. He looked at the spinning blades, then at his own hands. They were dirty, scarred, and trembling slightly from exertion, but they had built something. They had fixed something. "Good job," Lena said, handing him a water bottle. "Now, let's look at that radio." The afternoon heat drove them inside. The shop, as Lena called the main living area, was cool and dimly lit. While Noah did his homeschooling lessons on a tablet powered by the morning's work, Lena sat at her electronics bench, wearing a pair of magnifying spectacles. Ryan's radio lay in pieces before her like a dissected frog. "The circuit board is cracked," she said, poking it with a soldering iron. "That's a problem, but the real issue is the encryption module. It's locked down. Even if I power it up, it's going to demand a handshake code I don't have." "I have the codes," Ryan said. He was sitting on a stool cleaning a set of spark plugs for the backup generator. "But they change every 48 hours. My window is closing." Lena looked up over her glasses. "So we have a deadline. I like deadlines. They focus the mind." She reached for a spool of copper wire. "I can't fix the cracked trace on the board. It's too microscopic. But I can bypass it. We'll run a jumper wire. It's ugly. It's not mil-spec. But it closes the circuit. Will it transmit?" "It will transmit," Lena said. "But the range will be reduced. You'll need line of sight to a repeater or a satellite. Ryan watched her work. She held the soldering iron like a surgeon holds a scalpel. A wisp of smoke curled up, smelling of pine rosin. You know, Ryan started, Noah told me you built this whole place. We built it, Lena corrected without looking up. Noah was 4 when we came here. He could hold a flashlight before he could read. Where is his father? The question slipped out before Ryan could check it. Lena's hand didn't waver, but the silence stretched thin. She finished the solder joint, blew on it gently, and set the iron down. He's not here, she said simply. He was a structural engineer, bridges, big things. He believed that if you built the foundation strong enough, nothing could knock it down. He was wrong. Cancer doesn't care about foundations, Ryan. It eats the concrete from the inside. She picked up a pair of wire cutters. He died in a hospital room full of beeping machines that couldn't fix him. That's when I realized I was done trusting systems I couldn't control. I took Noah, bought this plot of wasteland, and started building something I could understand. Ryan looked at Noah, who was engrossed in a math problem about calculating the volume of a cylinder. The boy was the legacy, the one thing that couldn't be fixed with a wrench, but had to be nurtured. I'm sorry, Ryan said. Don't be. He gave us the blueprints, Lena said, gesturing to the heavy steel beams of the ceiling. He designed this frame before he passed. He's holding the roof up. That's enough. She snapped the radio case back together. Try it. Ryan took the device. It felt different now, heavy with history. He turned the knob. Static hissed, loud and angry. He keyed the mic. Any station. This is Viper 2 actual, transmitting in the blind. Comms check. Static. Then a crackle. Then a voice, faint and distorted, buried under layers of atmospheric noise. Pi that, 2 actual, repeat coordinates. Ryan's heart hammered. This is Viper 2 actual. I am at... He paused. He looked at Lena. Where are we? Lena slid a piece of paper across the bench. It had coordinates written in precise block letters. Ryan read them out. Requesting extraction. Over. Solid copy. Stormfront inbound. Extraction delayed. 48 hours. Maintain position. Out. The signal died. Ryan lowered the radio. They heard me. 48 hours. Stormfront? Lena stood up immediately, her demeanor shifting from technician to captain. She walked to the window. The sky in the west, usually a clear azure, was bruising with a sickly yellow-brown tint. The barometer is dropping, Noah said from the corner, looking at a dial on the wall. Fast. It dropped 10 millibars in an hour. Haboob, Lena said, the word tasting of dust. A big one. If extraction is delayed, that means it's too dangerous for helos to fly, which means it's going to be bad down here. She turned to Ryan. The vulnerability was gone. She was the engineer again. We have work to do. A dust storm of that magnitude will scour the paint off the walls. We need to secure the solar array, board the intake vents, and cover the garden. You wanted to pay your rent, Ryan? Now is the time. The desert doesn't give warnings. It gives ultimatums. Within an hour, the wind picked up, shifting from a breeze to a steady, howling gale. The temperature dropped rapidly as the pressure system collided with the heat of the valley. Ryan found himself shoulder to shoulder with Lena, wrestling heavy canvas tarps over the parabolic water heaters. The wind caught the fabric, snapping it like a whip. Pull! Lena screamed over the roar. If the sand hits the polished metal, it'll scratch the mirrors and ruin the efficiency. We lose our hot water. Ryan gritted his teeth, ignoring the protest of his bruised ribs. He hauled on the grommets, lashing them down with bungee cords. Noah was running between them, carrying tie-downs and duct tape, his small face covered by a mask and goggles. Garden is secured, Noah yelled, his voice thin in the wind. Check the chickens, Lena ordered. Get them into the coop and lock the storm door. Ryan moved to the solar array. The panels were on a tracking mount that followed the sun. If they were left broadside to the wind, the force would tear them off their hinges. We need to feather them, Lena shouted, running over. Turn them horizontal to the wind. The manual crank was rusted. Ryan grabbed it with both hands. The wind was pushing against the panels, generating hundreds of pounds of resistance. It was a battle of torque. Push, he told himself. This is just training. High-stress physical exertion. But his body failed. His grip slipped on the crank and the handle spun back, striking him in the shin. He went down, gasping in pain. "Ryan!" Noah was there instantly. "I'm fine!" Ryan snarled, angry at his own weakness. He scrambled up. He couldn't force it with strength, so he had to use his weight. He threw his body against the crank, locking his elbows. Slowly, agonizingly, the panels began to rotate, slicing into the wind instead of blocking it. Lena was there a second later, jamming a locking pin into the gear mechanism. "Got it! Let go!" They retreated inside, just as the wall of dust hit. It wasn't like rain. It was a physical solid. The world turned a dark, suffocating orange. The sound was deafening, millions of particles of sand hammering against the steel walls of the container home. It sounded like they were inside a sandblaster. Lena sealed the heavy steel door, spinning the locking wheel. The sudden drop in noise was jarring. The air inside was still, filtered, and safe. Noah pulled off his goggles, leaving raccoon eyes of clean skin on his dusty face. That was close. Ryan slumped against the wall, sliding down to the floor. His adrenaline was crashing. He felt the familiar tremor in his hands, the post-combat shake. Lena walked over to him. She didn't check his shin. She didn't ask if he was okay. She handed him a towel. "You didn't quit," she said. "I slipped," Ryan muttered. "I almost lost the array." "But you didn't," Lena said firmly. "In engineering, we have a term, safety factor. It's the capacity of a system to carry a load beyond the expected maximum. You think you're broken, Ryan, because you're not operating at your original spec, but you still have a safety factor. You held the line." She walked to the kitchenette and turned on a small gas burner to heat water for tea. "We're stuck here for at least 24 hours, she announced. "The radio won't work in this static. The solar is offline. We're running on batteries. We conserve power. We conserve water. We wait." Ryan looked around the room. The lights flickered once, then stabilized. The wind howled outside, a beast trying to claw its way in, but the structure held. Lena's husband had built the bones strong. Lena had built the system smart, and Noah was sitting on the rug, dealing a deck of cards. "Do you know how to play Go Fish?" the boy asked Ryan. Ryan looked at the X-Seal insignia he had kept in his pocket, fingering the metal edges. He looked at the boy. "No," Ryan said, pushing himself off the floor. "But you can teach me." As the storm raged outside, burying the world in dust, Ryan Cole sat at a small table and learned the rules of a child's game. He realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't guarding a perimeter or hunting a target. He was just being. And in the quiet hum of the battery bank, amidst the scent of sage tea and ozone, Ryan began to understand what Lena meant. You don't fix things to make them new. You fix them to make them work for now. But the storm wasn't just bringing dust. It was bringing something else. Deep in the night, as the wind began to die down, a proximity alarm chirped on Lena's console. Someone else was out there. The alarm was not a shrill bell. It was a rhythmic, low-frequency pulse designed to wake the subconscious without inducing panic. Lena Morales didn't gasp. She simply rotated her chair toward the security console, her fingers flying across a mechanical keyboard. "Sector 4, she said, her voice devoid of sleep. "Southwest perimeter." The sensors detected a mass displacement of the berm. Ryan was already up. The stiffness in his joints was forgotten, replaced by a surge of adrenaline that cleared the fog of sleep instantly. He moved to the monitor over Lena's shoulder. The screen displayed a grainy, monochromatic feed from a thermal camera. "Thermal imaging," Lena noted, pointing to the screen. "It detects infrared radiation, heat. The storm has cooled the ground surface, so anything living or mechanical stands out like a flare." On the screen, a large glowing white rectangle was wedged into the earthworks of the outer garden. It was a vehicle. Around it, 3 smaller heat signatures were moving erratically. "They crashed," Ryan analyzed. "The visibility was 0. They likely drifted off the old mining road and plowed into your flood berm." "Are they military?" Lena asked, looking at Ryan. Ryan studied the movement of the figures. They were flailing, pacing, kicking the tires. There was no tactical spacing, no scanning of sectors. No. Civilians. Disorganized. Panicked. "Panicked people are dangerous," Lena said. She flipped a switch cover and rested her finger on a red button. I have perimeter floodlights, 10,000 lumens. I can blind them. Not yet, Ryan cautioned. He placed a hand on her shoulder. If you blind them, they might start shooting blindly out of fear. Let me assess. Ryan felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. For the last few days, he had been the patient, the broken thing needing repair. Now, the dynamic had shifted. This was his domain. Assessment, threat identification, engagement. I'm going out, Ryan said. You're unarmed, Lena pointed out. I have a voice, Ryan replied, and I have the dark. Do you have a comms earpiece? Lena opened a drawer and tossed him a ruggedized Bluetooth headset. Connected to the base station. I'll be your overwatch. Noah? Ryan asked. Safe room, Lena said. He knows the drill. Ryan moved to the airlock. He paused, looking at his reflection in the glass. He was still bruised, still recovering, but the eyes staring back were sharp. He wasn't the victim of the desert anymore. He stepped out into the night. The wind had died down to a breeze, but the air was still thick with suspended dust, creating a surreal, foggy atmosphere. He moved silently, stepping heel to toe to dampen the sound of his boots on the gravel. He flanked the crash site, using the solar array as cover. He needed to see their hands. There were 3 men. They were shouting at each other in Spanish and English. They looked rough. Jeans, flannel shirts, boots. One of them was slamming his hand against the hood of the SUV, a battered Ford Expedition. It's dead! The radiator is busted, one shouted. We can't walk, man. It's 40 miles to the highway. Another yelled back. Ryan saw a glint of metal in the waistband of the tall one. A pistol, not drawn, but present. Lena, Ryan whispered into the headset. 3 packs, 1 visible weapon, holstered. Vehicle is disabled. They aren't attackers, they're stranded, but they are desperate. What's the play? Lena's voice was crisp in his ear. Project power, Ryan said. Turn on the lights in 3, 2, 1. Click. The desert night was obliterated by a bank of high-intensity LED floodlights mounted on the roof of the container home. The beams were focused directly on the SUV, pinning the 3 men in a cone of blinding white brilliance. They froze, shielding their eyes, their shadows stretching long and stark behind them. Stay where you are! Ryan's voice boomed from the darkness outside the cone of light. He used his command voice, a diaphragm-driven projection that sounded like it came from everywhere and nowhere. The man with the pistol reached for his belt. Don't do it, Ryan barked. Drop it, now! The psychological effect was immediate. They couldn't see Ryan. They could only see the blinding lights of what looked like a fortress. They were disoriented, crashed, and suddenly confronted by an unseen authority. The man hesitated, then slowly pulled the gun out with 2 fingers and dropped it in the sand. We just want water, the man shouted, his voice cracking. We crashed. Don't shoot. Ryan stepped into the edge of the light, hands visible but ready. He walked with a deliberate, slow pace. He didn't look like a lost hiker anymore. He looked like the operator he was. Back away from the vehicle, Ryan ordered. Sit on the ground, hands on your knees. They complied. They were exhausted, terrified men, likely coyotes or smugglers moving product through the back roads. But right now, they were just humans who had lost against nature. Ryan approached the vehicle. Steam was hissing from the front grille. The smell of coolant, sweet and chemical, hung in the air. Lena, I'm secure, Ryan said quietly. Bring water. Minutes later, Lena emerged, not with a tray, but with a crate of bottled water and a first aid kit. She walked right past Ryan, showing no fear, and handed a bottle to each man. Drink slowly, she commanded, echoing her instruction to Ryan days earlier. The men drank greedily. The tall one looked at Ryan, then at Lena, then at the strange, futuristic house behind them. Who are you people? Is this a black site? It's a home, Lena said. And you wrecked my berm. She walked to the SUV and popped the hood. Steam billowed out. She waved it away and shone a flashlight into the engine bay. Radiator core is punctured, she announced. Top tank is cracked. You're not going anywhere. We can't stay here, the tall man said, looking nervously at the horizon. We have a schedule. Ryan crossed his arms. You have a broken truck and no water. Your schedule is gone. The men looked at each other. The tension was palpable. Desperate men do desperate things. If they felt trapped, they might try to fight, even without the gun. Ryan looked at Lena. He saw the calculation in her eyes. She wasn't looking at the men, she was looking at the radiator. Can you fix it? Ryan asked. It's aluminum, Lena muttered. I can't weld it out here, but... She leaned in closer. The puncture is in the cooling fins, not the side tank. I can crimp the tubes. She turned to the men. If I fix your truck, you leave immediately. You don't come back. You don't tell anyone you saw this place. If you do, remember, we found you before you found us. The men nodded vigorously. Fix it, please. We just want to go. Ryan, I need the needle nose pliers and the JB weld from the shop, Lena ordered. For the next hour, Ryan stood guard, watching the men, while Lena performed roadside surgery on the SUV. It was a masterclass in improvisation. The radiator works by passing hot coolant through thin tubes, Lena explained aloud, half to herself, half to the audience of men watching her. Air passes over the fins to cool the liquid. If a tube is punctured, it leaks pressure. The system needs pressure to raise the boiling point of the water. No pressure, the water boils, the engine melts. She used the pliers to fold the aluminum tubes over on themselves, above and below the puncture, effectively sealing off the damaged section. I'm bypassing the broken loops, she said, squeezing the metal tight. You'll lose about 5% of your cooling capacity, but it will hold pressure. She mixed a 2-part epoxy putty and slathered it over the crimps for good measure. This cures in 15 minutes comfortably. It reaches full strength in an hour, but it'll hold enough to get you to the highway. She slammed the hood. Fill it with water, she told the driver. When the engine roared to life, the relief on the men's faces was evident. They didn't look back. They scrambled into the SUV, reversed out of the berm, and sped off into the darkness, taillights bobbing until they disappeared. Ryan picked up the pistol from the sand. He ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and tossed the pieces into a recycling bin. You handled that well, Lena said, watching the dust settle. You fixed the truck, Ryan said. Why help them? They were criminals. Lena looked at the tracks in the sand. Because if they stayed, they would have become desperate. And desperate people force you to make choices you can't come back from. Sometimes the safest way to win a fight is to make sure it never happens. That's engineering too. Removing the friction before it causes a fire. Ryan looked at her with new respect. She wasn't just a mechanic of machines, she was a mechanic of situations. The adrenaline faded, leaving a crisp, cool silence in its wake. The storm had completely cleared. The air, scrubbed clean by the sand and wind, was incredibly transparent. Ryan and Lena sat on the flat roof of the container home. Noah was between them, wrapped in a blanket, looking up. The sky was a blanket of diamonds on black velvet. Without the light pollution of the city, the Milky Way looked like a spilled bucket of glowing paint splashed across the cosmos. The radio works, Lena said softly. The interference is gone. I contacted your unit. The chopper will be here at 0900 hours tomorrow. Ryan nodded. The news should have made him happy. He was going back to civilization, to showers, to a salary, to his life. But he felt a heavy stone in his stomach. You're leaving? Noah asked, looking at Ryan. I have to, buddy, Ryan said. I have a job. But you didn't finish teaching me about the stars, Noah said, pointing up. You said you'd show me how to find the way home. Ryan sat up straighter. You're right, I did. He pointed to a bright constellation. See that one? Looks like a big spoon? That's Ursa Major, the Big Dipper. I see it, Noah said. Now look at the 2 stars at the end of the spoon's cup, Ryan instructed, tracing the line with his finger. Those are the pointer stars. If you draw a straight line through them and go up about 5 times the distance between them, you hit a star that isn't very bright, but it's important. That one. The North Star, Noah whispered. Polaris. Right. Polaris, Ryan said. It's the only star that doesn't move. The whole sky spins around it because it sits directly over the North Pole. If you can find that star, you always know where north is, and if you know north, you can figure out south, east, and west. You're never lost. Is that how you found us? Noah asked. Ryan hesitated. He looked at Lena. Her profile was softened by the starlight. "No," Ryan admitted. "I was lost. I was looking at the ground, not the sky. I found you because you were the only bright thing in the dark." Lena turned to look at him. There was a moment of understanding. Ryan wasn't just talking about the house lights. "Navigation isn't just about maps, Noah," Ryan continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes you navigate by dead reckoning. You figure out where you are based on where you've been and how fast you're moving. I've been moving fast for a long time, heading nowhere. Being here, it slowed me down. It gave me a fix on my position." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his compass. It was a high-grade military lensatic compass, heavy and durable. The glass was cracked from the crash, but the needle still floated true. "Noah, hold out your hand." The boy extended his small hand. Ryan placed the compass in it. "This is for you. It points north. But remember, the compass just shows you the direction. You have to decide where you want to go." Noah clutched the compass like it was a treasure. "I'm going to be an engineer. Like Mom. And an explorer. Like you." "That sounds like a good plan," Ryan said. Lena stood up. "It's late. We have a helicopter to catch in the morning." She offered a hand to Ryan to help him up. He took it. Her grip was rough, calloused, and strong. She didn't let go immediately. "You fixed the radio," Ryan said. "You fixed me." "You weren't broken, Ryan," Lena said softly. "Just disconnected. I just soldered the circuit back together." They went downstairs, leaving the desert silence behind them. But for the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt pregnant with possibility. Ryan lay on his cot for the last time, staring at the ceiling. He knew he was leaving tomorrow, but he also knew that a part of him, the part that had been wandering the desert long before the crash, had finally found a place to land. The question was, could he leave it behind? The sound of rescue is not always a relief. Sometimes it is an intrusion. At EO 900 hours, the sky was torn open by the thumping rhythm of a Black Hawk helicopter. To a civilian, it is a noise. To Ryan Cole, it was a frequency he had vibrated to for his entire adult life. It was the sound of extraction, of safety, of the mission ending. But standing in the yard of Lena's compound, watching the dust kick up in violent swirls, Ryan felt a strange resistance. The downwash from the rotors flattened the desert sage and rattled the tin sheets of the roof. It was chaotic. It was aggressive. It was the exact opposite of the efficient, quiet equilibrium Lena had built here. "Cover the seedlings!" Lena shouted over the roar, rushing toward her garden beds with a tarp. Ryan didn't run to the helicopter. He ran to help her. Together, they pinned down the canvas, protecting the fragile green shoots from the artificial storm the military was creating. Only when the plants were safe did Ryan turn toward the bird. A crew chief in a helmet and visor waved him forward frantically. "Go! Go! Go!" Ryan turned to Noah. The boy was wearing his welding goggles, staring at the helicopter with a mix of awe and fear. "Stay safe, Noah," Ryan shouted. "Keep your bearings." "North is that way," Noah pointed, clutching the compass Ryan had given him the night before. Ryan turned to Lena. She stood with her arms crossed, her hair whipped by the wind, her eyes squinting against the grit. She didn't look like a woman saying goodbye to a lover. She looked like an engineer evaluating a structural stress test. She was holding it together, but the tension was there. "You fixed me," Ryan said, leaning close so she could hear him. "I just patched the leak," she replied, her voice steady. "You have to do the engine rebuild yourself." Ryan reached into his pocket. He pulled out the one thing that defined him more than his name, the heavy metal trident insignia of the Navy SEALs. It was the symbol of his elite status, his suffering, and his brotherhood. He grabbed Lena's hand, pressed the metal into her palm, and closed her fingers over it. "Payment," he said, "for the water and the lesson." She looked at his hand, then his eyes. She nodded once. Acknowledgement. Ryan turned and ran. He ducked under the spinning rotors, the heat of the engines washing over him. The crew chief hauled him inside. The doors slid shut, cutting off the world of silence and sun. As the helicopter lifted, banking hard to the left, Ryan looked out the small window. The compound shrank rapidly. The wind turbine was a spinning toy. The solar panels were postage stamps. The garden was a green smudge in a sea of beige. And there, standing like two statues in the center of it all, were a woman and a boy. They weren't waving. They were watching. Ryan felt a physical pull in his chest, a sensation akin to G-force. It wasn't the ascent. It was the feeling of leaving his center of gravity behind. Reintegration is a shock to the system. Back at the base in San Diego, Ryan was processed with military efficiency, medical checks, debriefings, paperwork. The doctors marveled at his recovery. "You should be dead," the medical officer said, looking at Ryan's blood work. "Severe dehydration, exposure, but your electrolyte balance is surprisingly stable." "How?" "Saline and lentil stew," Ryan said, staring at the fluorescent lights. They hummed with a harsh electrical buzz that grated on his nerves. "Well, you're cleared for duty in 2 weeks. Take some leave. Relax." Relax. Ryan tried. He went to his apartment in the city. He turned on the tap, and water poured out. Endless, clean, unearned. He stood there for 10 minutes watching it swirl down the drain, feeling a wave of guilt. In the desert, that water would have been life. Here it was a utility bill. He walked down the street. The city was loud. Not the honest loud of a storm or a generator, but a chaotic, meaningless loud. Car horns, advertisements, conversations on phones, sirens. It was all noise. There was no signal. Ryan went to a coffee shop. He sat there, watching people obsess over screens, complaining about the Wi-Fi speed, about the foam on their lattes. "My mom can fix it." Noah's voice echoed in his head. Ryan looked at his hands. They were clean. The grease from the wind turbine was gone. The calluses were starting to soften. He felt fading. He was returning to the real world, but it felt like a simulation. The real world was out there, where the sun tried to kill you, and a tomato growing from the sand was a victory of engineering. He realized then that Lena was right about entropy. Everything moves toward disorder. His life in the city was disorder. It was movement without direction. He was a high-performance machine idling in traffic, carbon fouling his own plugs. He walked past a hardware store. In the window, there was a display of high-grade solar inverters. Pure sine wave, 98% efficiency. Ryan stopped. He looked at the price tag. He thought about his bank account, filled with combat pay he had never had the time to spend. He walked in. "I need that inverter," Ryan told the clerk. "And I need 12 deep-cycle AGM batteries. And do you carry hydroponic nutrient solution?" The clerk looked at him. "That's a lot of gear, buddy. You building a bunker?" Ryan smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in a week. "No," Ryan said. "I'm building a future. In materials science, there is a concept called plastic deformation. When you apply stress to a material, it stretches. If you release the stress early, it snaps back to its original shape. That is elastic deformation. But if you apply enough stress, if you push it past its yield point, the material changes shape permanently. It doesn't snap back. It becomes something new. Stronger, often, but different. Ryan Cole had undergone plastic deformation. He could not snap back to being just a soldier. It was 3 months later when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon of Lena's valley. Lena was on the roof, adjusting the angle of the solar panels for the winter solstice. She saw the vehicle coming. It wasn't a desperate, crashing SUV this time. It was a rugged, heavily modified truck, moving with deliberate speed. It navigated the washboard road smoothly, avoiding the soft sand. Noah, who was feeding the chickens, looked up. He squinted. "Mom!" he shouted. "Someone is coming!" Lena wiped her hands on her pants and climbed down the ladder. She walked to the gate, her heart doing a strange, irregular thud against her ribs. The truck pulled up to the perimeter and killed the engine. The silence returned, instant and absolute. The door opened. A pair of boots hit the gravel. Ryan Cole stepped out. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He was wearing work pants and a t-shirt. He looked healthier, filled out, but the sharpness in his eyes remained. He walked to the back of his truck and dropped the tailgate. "I brought the parts for the water heater upgrade," Ryan said, as if he had just stepped out for a pack of gum 5 minutes ago. "And I found a supplier for the wind turbine bearings. Ceramic. They won't pit in the sand." Noah ran forward, forgetting all protocol. Ryan caught the boy, lifting him up. "Hey, navigator, still finding north?" Every night, Noah beamed. Ryan put him down and looked at Lena. She hadn't moved. She was studying him, checking for cracks, checking for leaks. You came back, she said. I forgot something, Ryan said. Your compass? No, Ryan shook his head. My purpose. He walked over to her. He didn't try to hug her yet. He respected the perimeter she had built around herself. He simply stood there, occupying the space, offering his presence as a structural support. I resigned my commission, Ryan said quietly. I'm done breaking things, Lena. I want to help you fix them. Lena looked at the truck, loaded with supplies. She looked at Noah, who was already digging through the truck bed, marveling at a box of new tools. She looked at Ryan. Slowly, the engineer in her conceded to the human. Her shoulders dropped. The guard came down. The generator's acting up again, she said, a small smile tugging at the corner of her scarred lip. Fuel injector is clogged. Ryan smiled back. It was a genuine, relaxed smile. I can fix it. I know, she said. My mom says you can fix it. She mimicked Noah's voice from that first day. Ryan laughed, a sound that carried across the desert floor. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old compass, not the one he gave Noah, but a new one he had bought. He didn't need it anymore. He knew exactly where he was. The desert does not change, but the people in it do. If you were to fly over that valley a year later, you would see the compound had grown. There was a second greenhouse. The wind turbine spun silently, its ceramic bearings frictionless against the wind. Inside, sitting at the large wooden table, a family sat down to dinner. It was a family built not by blood, but by choice and circumstance, welded together by heat and pressure. Ryan Cole was no longer the lost soldier. He was the builder. He taught Noah how to calculate the trajectory of a falling star and how to plumb a sink. Lena taught Ryan that it was okay to be soft as long as your core was strong. They understood that life, like any complex machine, breaks down. It rusts, it fatigues. But you don't throw it away. You strip it down, you clean the parts, you lubricate the friction points, and you put it back together. And sometimes when you rebuild it, you find that the broken pieces fit together better than the new ones ever did. Because in the middle of the desert, they learned the most important lesson of all. Not everything that is broken is trash. Some things are just waiting for the right hands to put them back together.